on the 5th of May 1980, a 6-day siege at the Iranian embassy in London was ended when the SAS stormed the building, released the hostages, killed 5 terrorists, capturing a 6th. The terrorists had already killed 1 hostage and were threatening to slaughter the rest at half-hour intervals when the go-ahead was given for the rescue mission codenamed Operation Nimrod. Now, not only was the operation a success, but more importantly, it took place under the gaze of the world's media. Having TV crews camped outside the embassy ensured the rescue mission was captured on camera and streamed live on television around the world, causing a media sensation. And this in turn threw the near mythical SAS into the media spotlight. Now, not only does 1982's Who Dares Win give a small glimpse into their world, it's probably the best military recruitment video of all time. Let's take a look. So movie producers obviously watch the news too, one of which was the British film producer Ewan Lloyd. As he watched this real-life action movie play out on TV, he pretty much knew he had the subject for his next film. Now, Who Dares Wins isn't a retelling of the Iranian embassy siege, but it does share many of the same themes and basic plot of radicals taking over a building full of hostages, making Bond villain-level demands, and the subsequent rescue of the hostages and the killing of the bad guys in spectacular fashion.
Rod! Skellen! All right, it's Skellen.
So our protagonist here is Lewis Collins, a British TV actor who was the star of the popular TV series The Professionals that ran from the late 70s to the early 80s. Now, surprised to me that Collins was being touted to replace Roger Moore as James Bond and to bring some grit back to the Bond role, something Timothy Dalton eventually did. And Collins is very stern-faced and no-nonsense, but doesn't really have the screen presence to pull off a colossal role like 007, in my opinion. Who Dares Wins is practically his feature-length audition for the part of Bond, though. Anyway, here he plays Peter Skellen, a captain of the SAS who is kicked out of the regiment basically because he's a bit of a thuggish nutcase. However, this is just a cover to enable him to infiltrate the People's Lobby, an anti-nuclear organisation led by Frankie Leith, a great Judy Davis, who's equally nuttier and will do anything it takes to get the message of world peace across, including, oddly, launching nuclear missiles. So we have a topic of the day plotline about nuclear disarmament, and one that's occasionally cack-handedly delivered via some very ill-advised performance art. Now, I am a big fan of this film for many reasons, but the more and more I've watched it over the years, the more and more some of its political messages land a bit heavy for me. A good half of the film's runtime goes by until we get to any kind of siege, and although it does give us some brilliant SAS training ground sequences, especially ones featuring a US Ranger and a West German captain visiting the camp, shown to be well out of their depth whilst training like the SAS.
You didn't check that other carriage.
But you bastard.
Live bastards! Dead soldiers!
And it also gives a good chunk of its screen time to speeches about peace and living in harmony, and how the only road to peace features turning Scotland into a nuclear wasteland. But anyway, as I unfortunately alluded to, Lewis Collins is a bit of a dud in terms of leading men, so it's a good job that Judy Davis's activist leader is all 80s big hair and snarling menace, although she hilariously lets herself get picked up by Collins in an early scene that leads to a romance between the two.
I'd like to take you to bed. You got a car?
Yeah.
Then why don't you drive me back to your apartment, and I'll tell you all about me.
The fact Collins is frolicking with this nuclear psycho, apparently not troubling his conscience too much as he leaves his wife and baby daughter at home throughout. Anyway, Davis gets some great scenes, particularly later on in the film, as she goes up against one of her hostages, screen great Richard Widmark, Secretary of State, even though it kind of halts the momentum completely for a few minutes as they argue over the merits or otherwise of nuclear weapons.
On the level now, do you really think what you're doing will make the world a better place?
Could it possibly be worse?
Yeah, I think so. Consider a nuclear war.
Which is exactly what we're trying to prevent.
What the hell do you think we're trying to do?
Despite that though, the entire second half of Who Dares Wins moves at such a pace and efficiency and is lively enough that you can almost forgive its preachy and pretty drab first half. And when the SAS finally get the nod to breach the building, the film pulls out its trump card. So the filmmakers not only had technical advisors that were from the SAS, but they actually offered to carry out the final infiltration themselves, obviously offering a level of realism the production couldn't refuse. And I think for me this is Who Dares Win's biggest draw and its biggest strength. Even when the dramatic scenes aren't convincing, you're never far away from another live firing hostage simulation or watching the SAS training, running across ladders and shooting into and blowing up fake buildings like some sort of From Russia with Love Spectre style training academy.
Go!
One of my personal favourite sequences shows the police and the SAS methodically removing bricks from the wall of a house next door to pass a miniature camera into a room, marking the exact positions of terrorists and hostages before they breach. So as well as the aforementioned Richard Widmark, we also get the legendary Edward Woodward as Commander Powell, who doesn't get to do a great deal beyond talking into a megaphone. And we also have the awesome Hammer legend Ingrid Pitt as the nasty and murderous Helga.
It can fire 1,000 rounds a minute, with an effective target range of 100 meters. It is one hell of a murderous weapon.
Now the plot does push its luck a little bit by having anti-nuclear activists wanting to actually detonate a nuclear weapon. Well, there is a flimsy explanation for this during the final act, but it's a bit of a stretch. So as you'd expect, the finale draws quite heavily on the Iranian embassy siege that inspired it. It does show a rapid tactical assault rather than a Rambo-style mega shootout. And there's even some cool first-person shooter moments through the SAS soldiers' gas masks, laying the foundations for years and years of Call of Duty games.
Turns dead, third floor, still clearing second. I've got a jam, second door.
So Who Dares Wins was given a more generic action movie title for its American release, where it was known as The Final Option, nowhere near as cool. Directed by Ian Sharp, who directed his leading man Collins in the TV series The Professionals, and would also direct episodes of other famous TV shows like Robin of Sherwood and Minder, but would only make a handful of feature films, with this easily being his best work. And yeah, some of it hasn't aged terribly well. There's an interesting synth soundtrack that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't really mesh with its subject matter. And the performance art and nuclear-themed rock concert are completely skippable for me anyway. There's also some glorious period vehicles on show here for anyone who's a fan of that kind of thing. But one oddity that I noticed was that I'm sure there's a Lotus, a Porsche and something else, maybe a Jag, I can't remember. But I'm sure they're all the same or a similar colour, which isn't really all that relevant, but I just thought about it now. Anyway, I digress. Who Dares Wins. Have you seen it? If you have, let me know what you think. And if you haven't, go check it out.
Clearing second floor.